What a journey it has been. It's been long and it has been really hard. And yeah, I've had to dig deep, but it's been worth it. It's been 100% worth it. And I kind of knew as far back as 5 years ago that I would be here today and be telling my story, and that somehow I'd make it through and something powerful would happen. And that was a conviction that followed me all the way. That's not to say I had many doubts along the way, but there was an element of faith and assuredness that this was going to come together and this was going to work out to be something big and something bigger than me and my own suffering and my journey. It was for other people. In that time as well, I have to say I have completely changed as a person. I think I have become much more myself and more of who I am. I have become braver. That's not to say that I don't get nervous. Like today, the fear is there, but it doesn't hold me back, I think, in the way that it did before. I can still carry on and I do what I feel I need to do. The biggest thing is the fact that I feel so free today, and I feel the happiest I've actually ever been in my life. Sometimes it's when you are truly trapped and imprisoned, whatever kind of imprisonment that is, whether it's emotional, financial, whether that's literally. I think when you come out of that sense of freedom is incredible, and you appreciate freedom like you never did before. And in some ways, my life now as it is sort of 10 years ago maybe isn't in some ways that different, but my state of feeling and that sense of freedom that I have spiritually and emotionally, mentally, is brilliant and kind of makes it worth it. So my story is a sad one, and it does reference suicidal ideation, which is when you want to not be here anymore. It's just not really thinking that life is worth living for. I did have PTSD. I was suffering things like domestic abuse and really kind of hitting poverty pretty hard. But it did all work out in the end. Although those negative things were very much there and really impacted me, there was also a fight for freedom that ended with victory, and spiritual change as well as a social change. I met my martial arts teacher at probably the worst point in that whole journey, looking back. It was awful. I think I was putting quite a brave face on it at the time. My teacher, I think, saw that the JKD was something I really needed, and I think I did. I really had to find a spirit of the fight. It was kind of there, but I kind of needed support, I think, through that, and a sense of, I think, someone or community being with you in that fight, even if they don't even know what it is that you're going through. I think solidarity in the fight was important. And it was at that point I probably made one of the bravest decisions I ever made around a legal battle that I was going through. Just to kind of give you a bit of context, because I think that all sounds quite vague and quite maybe mysterious. As all stories often start, it sort of began with a really bad breakup. So I'd been in a relationship for 10 years, and I'd known this person for a very, very long time. We'd been friends for a very long time. Everything about it seemed kind of, on the surface, really pleasant. This person was a good guy, good job, doing nice things for people. So I think it was hard for me to acknowledge by the end of the 10 years that the person I was in love with was not the reality that was in front of me. So I was about to be married. I had 3 months to go to being married, and I called the whole thing off really dramatically. I came back from a holiday and just it was going to be over. I knew it was going to be over. He was incredibly angry. There were threats about how I deserve to be punished, how I should be made to suffer for what I've done. I was physically scared for my safety, thinking back to some of the patterns of behaviour that had been slowly building up over time, that I felt I did feel quite afraid. I left the house, and this is a house, by the way, that I had bought. I'd saved up for years for this flat, and I really wanted it. It'd always been my kind of dream, I guess, to own my own house. he had come onto the mortgage, persuaded me to get himself onto the mortgage and to the deeds, and the build up to our engagement, although I had said I was really unhappy about it, and I didn't feel, I think my words were, when the mortgage got agreed with him on it, I said, this is the most disempowering day of my life. And I said that the suffragettes were turning in their graves, to which he said nothing back. So there was an element of, clearly I was coerced into something that I didn't agree with. But on the outside, I was engaged and about to be married. So in a lot of ways, this looked like a happy kind of relationship that was going in this direction. That's not even the hard part. That's actually just the beginning. So after those threats were made, some of my friends, I started opening up, because I hadn't opened up to anybody at that point about what had been really going on behind closed doors. So I started talking to friends, and they were like, Rach, you need to go to the police. You need to tell them. If you're still worried that your safety is going to be compromised, you need to tell the police about what's going on. So I did. There were 2 detectives. One of them took it really seriously, and I said, I'm worried if you are going to question him, I'm a bit worried that there's going to be a reaction from that. And she said, I'm sorry, but it's out of your hands. This is the right thing to do. I felt conflicted about that, but I actually thought that probably is the right thing. And there was another detective there. And this male detective was slumped over my kitchen table. He wasn't really listening. He had his walkie-talkie on really loudly, and I didn't feel heard at all. Later on, they decided to not do anything, and they dropped it completely. I then kind of had to begin dealing with the kind of financial fallout of separating. Now, I don't think I realised at the time that financial enmeshment is really difficult to get out of. Like, it's so easy to get into joint accounts and joint loans. You know, banks are very happy to give out loans to people, but it's very difficult actually a lot of the time when you separate and you become financially independent. And that's what makes this journey, for me and for so many others, so difficult. I began to get lots of letters threatening court action, that I need to sell my house in order to give him the money that he felt entitled to. I was obviously very reluctant. I'd worked really hard for that house. I'd taken out loans to do it up. It was a fixer-upper. I'm not a wealthy person, so I'd invested a lot personally, physically, financially, and I just felt like it was wrong that he was coming in on the last minute and taking the entire privilege or majority privilege. I just felt that was unfair, and that his behaviour wasn't called to account either. So this went on, and I began to kind of feel like really depressed. It went on for such a long time. We're talking years, and I began to kind of realise that actually what I was going through was PTSD, and in fact that's what I was signed off work with. So anybody that's tried to fight a legal battle without a job and without finances, like, good luck to you. And also, just to kind of make matters worse, if any of you tried to kind of find a solicitor in the pandemic, it's tough, let alone trying to access any legal aid, which is also really difficult. It just got bleaker and bleaker and bleaker, and I just began to kind of, I don't know, give up, but also it kind of like became hilarious, because I'm still in my home, I'm still okay, like on my day-to-day, I'm okay, I'm not working, but I'm fine. And I began to feel thankful for the things that I did have, and the things that were constant in my life, and the things that I could be just happy and joyful for. My friendship group entirely changed, and my support network entirely changed. I began to seek out support. I began to put my mind first and my happiness first, or what joy I could access. I really began to have quite a spiritual awakening, and that really shifted my mind to think not just about if I'm going through this and other people are going through this. I began to speak out a bit more. I'd already gone to the police twice with evidence, nothing. I went to the banks and they didn't help, they didn't want to know. I went through their complaints procedure, and they said to me, I've ruffled many feathers further up the chain, apparently, which I thought was hilarious. But obviously I still made them feel really bad about how they shouldn't have sold a loan to somebody that didn't really want to be in it. That all happened. Then they suggested to me go to the financial ombudsman. So I went to the financial ombudsman. That was also a waste of time as well, because they didn't do anything, they have no teeth, and they can't fight for you either. Then I was like, what on earth do? I have done everything. Then I was in touch with a journalist, or she heard about me, and she wrote about me anonymously in the Sunday Times. She also wrote about me later on in the Times. My name, you won't find it out there. because I was in a legal battle, you have to be anonymous. So I also was worried again for my safety, so I had to keep all of this very kind of hidden, but I still wanted to think about and work towards other people who in this same situation. I was coming across, the more I shared, I was coming across more and more people who had this similar experience, and they would open up to me and they would tell me these things. I was lucky. Like, for me, it was years, but it's actually, for a lot of people, it's decades. And sometimes they die and they never actually get that financial freedom that they wanted. And I think that is so, so wrong and is so unfair. I think there should be better systems in place, and there should be justice for those people who are going through what I've gone through. The system needs completely reworking. We need to look at it from a financial, structural perspective, from a police perspective, also in terms of how we approach mental health. There's a lot of great stuff out there now. There's the power, threat, and meaning framework, and that's a really fantastic framework about, instead of being preoccupied with labeling people and diagnosing people, actually asking them what happened to them to make them feel the way that they do. And that's, I think, a really good way of framing trauma and what people have gone through. So I kind of had to heal myself. I had to be my own lawyer, essentially, which was me really beginning to take control of my life and my journey and switch things around. I still didn't have much hope, but I did have hope, but not for any physical reasons. It was more internal, and then just, I guess, faith. With the martial arts aspect, I think that was the thing that triggered the spiritual journey and the thinking outside of myself. I think it was also at that point, because I was being threatened with court action, and I really didn't want to go because I didn't want to see my ex-partner there. I was terrified of seeing him. I was refusing to go, and it was really, as I was kind of getting involved with fighting physically, I decided I'd turn things around, and I would be willing to go to court, and I'd be willing to fight this. I had gathered my evidence over that period of time, and I was willing to go. I was ready. And at that point, he turned around and said, no, he didn't want to go to court. So after all of that work and all of that effort, we never did have a day in court in the end. So it's a lot of kind of gathering of evidence for, in some ways, no reason, but actually it was bullying, I guess. It was the point of intimidation. You don't really want the day in court at all. It was just a way to keep me in a certain spot. And so when I came back and said, okay, let's do this, I'm ready, suddenly that person didn't want to do that anymore. I just want to kind of bring it back to, again, a quote that Bruce Lee said. He said, always be yourself, express yourself, have faith in yourself. Do not go out and look for a successful personality to duplicate. And I think that really struck me, because during round about the time I had that decision about court action, or maybe it was just before that, I had this opportunity to share my case study with the domestic abuse bill. So again, this is all anonymous, but I shared it and I described what was happening to me financially and my entrapment that I found myself in. It went forward, and really because of the case study that I put forward among other people as well, not just me, economic abuse was recognised as a crime to be taken as seriously as physical abuse, as seriously as sexual abuse and emotional abuse, mental abuse, all of them. And not only that, but to be recognised that it happens post-separation. In fact, it's worse post-separation than when it is when you're in the relationship, because that's when often the revenge takes place. I hadn't really thought about that until much later on, I guess. I'd almost forgotten about my own journey to freedom. I was just getting on with life. But looking back, there were so many wonderful opportunities. I think by embracing just what I believed to be right, regardless what the system told me was right, because they didn't seem to recognise the injustice. I knew what the sense of justice was, and that seemed to be so removed from reality. But I was able to really do things like not just contribute to the domestic abuse bill, but that triggered lots of other things. So I've worked with lots of other journalists as well, again, anonymously. So I was interviewed by Red Magazine, Good Housekeeping. Also, I was interviewed on a podcast about financial freedom. The Financial Conduct Authority, I was involved with a consultation with them. Also, Hogan and Lavell's international law firm. I worked on a report with them as well about how we can find justice for those people affected. NatWest Bank also asked me to speak to them about these kinds of issues. Actually, last week, I gave a talk to parliamentary staff. This time, it was a great moment that I could say my name and say my name is Rachael Partleton, and I have gone through economic abuse, and I'm going to talk about it today. Because before that point, it had to be anonymous. There's something so great about being able to be who you are and speak honestly and speak freely and not feel fear about what might happen to you afterwards. Since that talk, I'm just overwhelmed really with the honesty that people have shared with me since. And I'm talking MPs asking me what to do and what advice I can give to them or people in their constituency. I don't really know where this is going, but I feel like I'm onto something. I know there's this pressure to have like a website and social media, and I'm not quite ready for all of that. I'm just allowing it to kind of happen quite naturally. It's an exciting time, and I do feel like my life is ahead of me. And like I said, the sense of freedom I have now that I am free, that now that I have been able to get out of financial entrapment, I really want to share that with other people, and I want other those that are affected, that are feeling really down and depressed, and that they don't have control in their situation. I want to give them some hope. I also want to help them with the practicals and the logistics as well, not just a motivational talk, or although that's very important. I want to get to the nitty gritty. These things are complicated. They're multi-layered, and I'm really excited by all of that. It doesn't fluster me. I love it. That's really what I want to do moving forward. And if I could say anything, if this message just gets to anyone, how can I help you or anyone else out there that is going through this? And that's my message for today. Yeah.